Welcome to Northwest Newsweek, and thanks for being with us. A major announcement for the town of Atikokan. MPP Bill Morrow was in the community on Wednesday to confirm the province will be funding a new consolidated school. It's got a price tag of $23 million. Corey Nordstrom reports.
Thunder Bay Atikokan MPP Bill Morrow announced a substantial sum being put forward by the province for the creation of a new consolidated school in Atikokan for public students to attend for their entire school career.
It's a contribution from our government and through the Ministry of Education of just north of $23 million. They will go to tender soon. It will result in a consolidated K to grade 12 school. The community has been advocating for this. The school board, trustees, the Accommodation Review Committee are all on board, have done great work.
The current Atikokan High School will be partially demolished and rebuilt to serve all grades of students. With the low enrollment in the small town, the expanded building will take in the nearly 150 students from the North Star Community School. The Rainy River School Board will declare that building surplus and make a decision on it at a later time. The new consolidated school will also incorporate the Contact North programs and Confederation College for post-secondary education in the community.
We're really excited because this really represents a learning hub. When you put together infant, preschool, school age, and now post-secondary all with one building, it really represents the significance of learning and lifelong learning for the town of Atikokan.
The new school will create an extra 4 childcare spaces for a total of 49. It won't be a full demolition of the current high school. The double gymnasium will be kept intact, and the resource center and tech classrooms will be converted to multi-use space. Campbell says the new school will be easier to change with the times.
But a new facility gives more flexible learning environments. We can start to look to how we can design it so that as technology evolves, as programming evolves, we can adapt with those changes.
Construction on Atikokan's new school could begin as early as the 2018-2019 school year, and by the fall intake of 2020-2021, all students in Atikokan, grades K through 12, will be at the new facility. Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Minister Michael Gravel is addressing the latest revelations about the new Nipigon River Bridge. The $106 million project is already 1 year behind schedule. That's following the 2016 bridge failure. Now, government documents obtained by the Canadian press show the additional work will take nearly 3 years to carry out. Additionally, the resulting cost overruns are well above the initial $8 to $12 million estimate. Adam Riley has more.
In January of 2016, 43 days after opening to the public, the new Nipigon River Bridge suffered a catastrophic failure, causing the west side of the bridge to lurch up 2 feet after bolts holding the bridge deck in place broke. The incident effectively split Canada in half for 17 hours and made headlines across the country. Several months later, Transport Minister Stephen Del Duca revealed the cause of the break and announced an $8 to $12 million cost increase for retrofits to the bridge. Now the Canadian press is reporting those costs have grown substantially, but the province is remaining tight-lipped on the subject. Who pays for those extra costs are the topic of discussions between the province and the contractor, according to Northern Development Minister Michael Gravel.
I'm not involved in those discussions, so I can't give you those kinds of details. And whether somebody at the Ministry of Transportation can, I'm not so sure they can or not. But those are the important discussions that are taking place, and certainly we want to be sure that whoever is responsible for the incident that obviously had such an impact on the bridge and the work that was going forward is responsible for the payments of those costs, and we think that's important for the taxpayers of Ontario.
It appears the government does know how much the costs have overrun. The documents obtained by the Canadian press through a Freedom of Information request show the amounts are there, but they're all redacted. Progressive Conservative Party critic Michael Harris says the public deserves to be informed of all the findings right now.
It may not, in fact, be the bolts themselves. It could be a construction process of ensuring that the bolts were actually tightened properly that led to this failure. But I think it's important that he and the Premier release that information and the speculation.
The documents also mention the other 2 lanes of the bridge won't open until late 2018, a year behind schedule. Gravel says the priority is to complete the project.
But we certainly weren't going to wait for those to be completed in order to move forward with the project. And the project is not far behind. We're hoping and expecting for a late construction 2018 season opening, which will be great.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Two people are dead following a multi-vehicle collision that closed Highway 17 last Saturday near Vermilion Bay. According to the OPP, several emergency service crews were called to the scene around 5:30 p.m. and the highway was closed for about 9 hours. The driver and front passenger of an eastbound SUV were killed after the vehicle lost control and collided with a westbound tractor trailer. 3 other passengers were transported to hospital with serious injuries and later airlifted to Winnipeg. The victims of the SUV have been identified as 31-year-old Dustin McLaughlin of Portage La Prairie, Manitoba, and 13-year-old Cheyenne McLaughlin of Nipigon. Well, there's a big question mark regarding the highway maintenance and snow plowing contractor for this area. The British parent company for Carillion Canada went into liquidation on Monday, swamped by nearly $4 billion in debt and liabilities. The company employs 43,000 people, including 6,000 in Canada. Carillion is the country's largest road service contractor and is responsible for plowing and maintaining highways in many parts of Ontario, including the Thunder Bay District. But it was business as usual at the Carillion yard just outside of the city this week. Employees say work is continuing as usual, with plows and graders continuing to operate. It's still not clear what the long-term implications will be for Carillion Canada. The Ministry of Transportation says it's actively exploring options to make sure Ontarians continue to receive winter highway maintenance. The NDP and union officials with OPSU are calling on the province to bring highway maintenance back under public management. There's no word yet from the ministry as to a backup plan should Carillion seize all of its operations here in Canada. A major utility merger in the Northwest this week as city councils in both Thunder Bay and Kenora have voted to combine Thunder Bay Hydro and Kenora Hydro. It's a deal that's been in the works since late 2016. Thunder Bay Hydro officials say the cost of running a utility company is growing. That's due to new government regulations and increased complexity in the industry. Those changes have been especially hard on smaller utilities like Kenora Hydro. At City Hall this week, Thunder Bay Hydro President Rob Mace gave a presentation on the proposed merger. Thunder Bay would own around 91% of the new company, while Kenora would own the remaining 9%. The company combined would be able to save money by combining things like billing and regulatory systems. However, Mace says many operations will remain as is and most customers won't notice a change.
You'll see very little difference in Thunder Bay. We're going to maintain the Thunder Bay office. Thunder Bay will be the head office of the merged company. All of our staff will remain. All of our operations center staff will remain. In Kenora, Kenora has an existing operations center with crews. We will maintain the crews in Kenora to maintain and build the electricity system, restore power as needed.
Down the road, the regulations, the rules, and everything else are harder and harder and harder to for small utilities. I mean, the government just keeps throwing more and more red tape at us, and to try and keep up with that, there's a cost. And for a small utility to keep up with them costs, it might be too significant.
Thunder Bay City Council voted unanimously in favor of the merger during Monday's council meeting, with Kenora Council voting in favor of the deal the next day. The name of the new merged company is still yet to be determined. In an effort to save a herd of caribou by moving them to an island near Terrace Bay, it was carried out this past weekend. The herd was being wiped out by wolves on Mishpicotton Island near Wawa. Many residents, including Manitoulin Algoma MPP Michael Mantha, had been calling on the Ministry of Natural Resources to step in and save the animals. Over the course of 3 days, a team of specialists from the MNR tracked down and tranquilized the animals. They were then transported 130 kilometers northwest to the Slate Islands, just south of Terrace Bay. A total of 9 animals, 8 cows and 1 bull, were relocated to their new home on Lake Superior. MNR spokesperson Yolanta Kowalski explains the process.
They're initially net gunned from a helicopter, and then there's a process where they are given a sedative, and they're bundled up, so their eyes are covered and they're bundled up in what looks like a giant sleeping bag. And then the animals are moved to a helicopter and then they were taken to the Slate Islands, and then the process is reversed, and then the animal was, gets up and moves into where it's going to be living.
Kowalski says in the fall, observations made by the MNR determined there could be up to 100 caribou left on Mishpekauton Island. She adds to her knowledge there are no wolves on the Slate Islands, meaning this move should allow for the herd to grow and survive. Thunder Bay has another new medical marijuana clinic, and the organization behind it has big plans for a cannabis production facility here in the city. Rainy River Cannabis Collective has set up shop temporarily at Rainbow on May and will take over the vacant space next door in a month or two. Angela Olson is the collective's co-founder. She says they already have about 116 patients with a goal of seeing 10 per day. Olson emphasizes there's no cannabis at their location and the clinic is not a dispensary. She encourages locals to grow their own marijuana for medical purposes, and they can provide assistance there. Tuesday was the one-year anniversary of the Cannabis Collective's Fort Francis location opening, and Olson says the Thunder Bay Clinic is the beginning of an expansion plan.
Kenora, Dryden, and I'm looking at Winnipeg. But our overall goal is to open an LP or a licensed production facility in Thunder Bay, which would mean about 70 to 100 full-time jobs. We are shopping buildings, and we found one, but we haven't inked the deal. So as soon as we do, I will let you know. But our vision is to open a full licensed production facility that is 100% medical, zero recreational sales whatsoever.
Potential patients can self-refer at the Thunder Bay Clinic with their medical records specific to the condition they're looking to treat. Well, we're going to take a short break, but next, a pitch for Thunder Bay to bring a ferrochrome processing plant to the city, which, if successful, would process raw materials from the Ring of Fire and bring jobs to the city. Stay with us. Well, if completed, it would bring hundreds of jobs to the Thunder Bay area. But first, the city and the Fort William First Nation need to win the bid to be the site of a Noront ferrochrome processing plant. At a public information session Wednesday evening, the Thunder Bay and Fort William First Nation Community Economic Development Corporations briefed the public on why the North Shore of Lake Superior is the best option for ferrochrome processing in the north. Xiaoli Li has more.
Whichever city wins the right to host a Noront chromite processing plant wins hundreds of jobs, around 500 from the plant alone. There are 4 cities in the running for the right to process Noront ferrochrome from the Ring of Fire: Timmins, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, and Thunder Bay with the Fort William First Nation. But Thunder Bay Community Economic Development Corporation boss Doug Murray says Thunder Bay has many factors that make it stand out.
Sudbury obviously has been doing something like this because of the nickel processing facilities, but they're not on water, right? And it's still, 700 to 800 kilometers from Nakina to Sudbury. It's 325 kilometers to Thunder Bay.
At this information meeting, Murray laid out the pros and cons of the Fort William First Nation Thunder Bay joint bid. The city's lack of development fees is attractive, and given the large scale of the proposed Ferrochrome facility, that could be a factor in Thunder Bay's favor. Murray says Mission Island has been selected as the potential site due to its size and easy access for trucks, rail cars, and ships.
We more importantly have Thunder Bay terminals that handles raw materials today that's going to be used in this type of process. It's already installed. There's $150 to $200 million of equipment that's sitting there that Noront won't have to invest in. This is already here.
If successful, the region would also need to scale up electricity generation. Ferrochrome processing needs huge amounts of electric power, and more sustainable options than Thunder Bay and Atikokan generating stations will need to be considered. After the presentation, CEDC reps took questions from the crowd. People wanted to know how far away the project is and what costs the city could incur for its bid, while others just wanted to know what kind of jobs were available.
I just kind of asked them, how many engineers and laborers and technicians do they think are going to work at the plant? And they told me, myself, that it's going to be about 10% engineers, which is pretty significant. 50 engineers is a lot, and I like to hear that.
Murray says the next step is for Fort William First Nation Band Council and Thunder Bay City Council to endorse the joint bid. Bids to Noront are due at the start of February, but there's no word on when the company will make a decision. Xiaoli Li, TBT News.
As the Wynne government begins to craft its 2018 budget, different groups and industries want to ensure they aren't forgotten when it comes time to hand out the money. And an all-party committee was in Thunder Bay Monday for a pre-budget consultation, and much of what committee members heard related to the forest industry. Ryan Benazzo has more.
We need the jobs.
Atikokan Mayor Dennis Brown says any further government restrictions placed on the forestry sector will have dire economic consequences for his municipality. Brown was one of several presenters at Monday's pre-budget consultation to speak in support of the industry.
If the mill closes down, then there's 90 good-paying jobs out of the mill, direct jobs, and then the indirect jobs for the harvesting and the transporting of the wood is almost 3 times that. So we're looking at over 200 jobs, and we certainly can't have that.
Forestry insiders are also on edge. Come July, an exemption that allows the industry to operate under the Crown Forest Sustainability Act of 1994, as opposed to the far more punitive Endangered Species Act, comes to an end. Ontario Forest Industries Association President Jamie Lim, who also addressed the Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs, worries the government will bow to pressure from environmental groups that Lim insists are unfairly targeting the industry over changes to caribou migration. She says the province needs to take a lesson from Finland, a country that's smaller than Ontario, yet harvests more than 3 times as much wood.
If they thought for 1 minute that the forest sector was a significant contributor to climate change, they wouldn't be allowing their sector to harvest 80 million cubic meters by 2025. That would be out of the question.
Some members of the committee, particularly opposition MPPs, agree and say the provincial government needs to get out of the industry's way.
Whether it's the caribou restrictions, the endangered species, red tape, all of the other restrictions that are strangling the businesses, only a mere fraction of the forestry sector, all of the allowable forest lands in northern Ontario are being harvested.
A long-term fix would be basically have the forestry industry under the Crown Forest Sustainability Act alone, which is, its purpose is to protect species and to protect the industry and protect the environment.
This is really about doing the right thing for the forestry sector, for those people employed by the forestry sector, but also making sure we do the right thing by the communities that surround those forests and for our province, for our children and our grandchildren. And we'll find that balance, and I know the minister's working closely on that.
This is the first of 5 public consultations being held across the province this week. The Standing Committee on Finance and Economic Affairs will prepare a report with the information gathered that will be presented at Queen's Park in the coming months. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Well, we're going to take another short break, but up next, Kenora MP Bob Nault has big plans for the region moving forward in 2018. Kenora's Member of Parliament, Bob Nault, says he wants to see the increased investment in the Northwest continue in 2018. While there has been significant growth in the region over the last 3 years, Nault says there's still much to be done. Ryan Benazzo has more.
Kenora MP Bob Nault is celebrating the new year, predicting a bright future for the riding and the Northwest. But he notes there are still some things to work on.
I think the #1 issue for us in the region is the economy.
Nault, who took office in 2015 after a 12-year hiatus from federal politics, says investments still need to be made in what he calls key infrastructure.
We focused on a lot of areas that we found that were weak, and we're going to continue to do that. Infrastructure, whether it's roads, whether it's airports, whether it's broadband.
The Northwest received money for several projects in 2017, including $60 million in August for Wate Power to connect 22 Northern First Nations to the provincial energy grid, and another $69 million for fiber optic internet service in 5 northern communities. This year, Nault plans to improve small business in the north.
We're also going to be part of Navdeep Bain's hub area, so there will be 6 hubs for business in the north. So Northwestern Ontario has 2, Thunder Bay and Kenora. And I think that makes a big difference as well, because we're going to work with small business, reduce small business tax rates, all the kinds of things that you want to do to create an economy.
But he admits Canada took a misstep when it comes to working with small business. Nault notes, however, that changes have been made to the small business tax structure since it was announced last year.
It's fair to say that the Minister of Finance dropped the ball on the whole communication side. The whole abilities to explain our rationale and reasons why we're trying to make the system fairer for Canadians generally without targeting one group or another. That was a difficult process, but that's the learning curve with you get a brand new government, a lot of new ministers.
Nault also plans to push for the twinning of the Trans-Canada Highway in the region this year, believing it will open up additional opportunities. Ryan Benazzo, TBT News.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau fulfilled a campaign promise Friday by making a visit to the Pikangikum First Nation. The community north of Kenora has been called ground zero of the crisis on First Nations across Canada. Friday afternoon, the Prime Minister took questions from the students at Pikangikum's new school, which opened in 2016. The students asked about the government response to the First Nations drinking water, housing, and progress on the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women. However, another student pressed Trudeau on the youth suicide crisis that's been happening in Pikangikum.
Many young lives are lost to suicide in this community. What are you going to do about the ever-increasing suicide rates in this community, especially among our youth?
There are two levels on which we have to work on this. We have to make sure that in the short term, people who are going through difficult moments get the kind of support, get the kind of help, get the kind of response from their community that can help them get through difficult moments and succeed. But in the medium term and longer term, we have to make sure that young people have hope for the future.
Trudeau is the first Prime Minister to have ever visited Pikangikum. He was joined by Nangrand Chief Alvin Fiddler, Indigenous Services Minister Jane Philpott, Kenora MP Bob Nault, and Thunder Bay Rainy River MP Don Rusnak. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of Northwest Newsweek. I'm Leanne Evans. Thanks for being with us, and be sure to tune in next time.